Yeah, well, we could see the first snow of the season here in Central Ohio this weekend. Can you believe that?
I can't. Well, while I wrap my mind around that, what's the rest of the winter going to look like? Chief Meteorologist Bill Kelly here now to break down the season with his much anticipated winter forecast.
You know, outside of what is Bob Kendrick and Yolanda Harris really like, the biggest question I get out there is what is this winter going to be like, especially this time of year? So what we do is we look at a lot of different things. We spend weeks putting together a winter weather forecast. Some of the things we look at: climatology. What is our normal? Where should we be when we look at that? Where do we go for each month? Where do we go for the end of the season when you look at the overall climatology? We, of course, look at history. We can go back and go a year, 5 years, 10, even 100 years. History plays a huge role in putting together a winter weather forecast. We look at what's called the Arctic Oscillation. What are the winds doing up in the polar regions? We also look at what's called the NAO, which is the North Atlantic Oscillation. That has something to do with what's going on in the northern part of the Atlantic Ocean. But what really affects our weather big time is whether or not there is an El Nino or La Nina. This year, and by the way, that is warming of the ocean currents in the Pacific. This year, the forecast calling for a weak La Nina year. And so let me show you what La Nina is, and then we'll get into our forecast details. Again, talking about the equator in the Pacific Ocean. We all know if you go down to tropical locations, the ocean water is warm. Well, during La Nina, what happens is there's a big dome of high pressure that develops into the eastern side of the Pacific and an area of low pressure that develops, a pretty strong one, over to the west. Now, air travels from high to low pressure. And so what happens is when that occurs, you get these strong trade winds that kind of like a bathtub swash the water along. Now, as it pushes it off to the west to replace it, we get what's called upwelling. You get water that comes in from down beneath. That cools it down. And so when we have this over a course of time, it is what is called La Nina. There are some patterns to look at. So here's a generalized pattern around the country. During La Nina, typically, you'll get dry and warmer conditions down to the south. Not good for the fire situation for those folks down there. We'll typically see wet conditions here, cold and wet up to the north, and sometimes that jet stream will kind of migrate back and forth. So we take all of this information, we put it together, and we come up with our official winter weather forecast. So with that said, let's head on over here to this camera, and we're going to utilize this technology we have to kind of draw up and give you the forecast. Things that you can actually take with you, not just generalization. So here's what we're looking at. 5 points. First of all, forecast number 1. I think when it's said and done in terms of snowfall, we are looking at normal to above normal snowfall, most of it coming into the second half of the season, and the possibility of getting above average snowfall for the month of March. Typically in March, we'll see about 4 inches of snow. I wouldn't be surprised this year if we had 6, 7, maybe 8 inches or more of snow in March. Now, how much snow are we expecting? Total for us, the normal is 26.7. This year, going to go between about 25 to 35 inches of snow. That is the range that I'm going to put on it this far out. Also, I think it's interesting to note, in terms of having a white Christmas, officially and technically a white Christmas for us, it means an inch of snow or more on the ground on Christmas Day. Typically only happens 1 in 4 years, 25%. I think we have an above average chance to have some snow on the ground at Christmas. So that might be some good news for some of you. Now, talking about temperatures, point number 4, I think the overall temperature spread, when it's said and done, the average is going to be below normal with a cold snap potentially late in the season. What do I mean by that? Here's some specifics for you. I think that we'll see a few of those days here where the low temperature gets below 0. I did not say that last year. I said I don't think we'll have any below 0 days. We didn't. I do think we'll have several of them. And the other thing is 1 or 2 snaps, stretches, where we have temperatures below freezing for a period of 4 or 5 days in a row. We could foreseeably see maybe a 6, 7, 8 day stretch where we don't get above the freezing mark at all. So those are the 5 points, an average to slightly below normal temperature-wise winter, and I think we'll see at or above normal snowfall with those specifics that we just gave. Good news for some, maybe not so for others. We'll meet here in April and see how we do. You're watching Fox 28 News at 10. We'll be right back.